Warding in League of Legends is one of the core mechanics of the game. If you aren't doing it, then your teammates will make sure to kindly inform you that you should. We have all been told that warding, hitting vision plants, and clearing vision are the things we should be doing to win more games. But is this really important? Every high elo player seems to really care about vision, but a player came to me to tell me about his challenge. He wanted to climb from low elo to master, but without using a single ward, to see if it was possible. But he didn't stop at just wards. He banned sweeper, he couldn't clear enemy wards including control wards, and worst of all, no using vision plant and no scuttle crab, because they both add to your vision score. He had to finish every game at 0, and you can see the evidence in his match history. Every single game he has 0 in this column. This is the story of his climb, of whether he made it all the way, and what we can learn from his challenge. And hopefully after this video you can finally have an excuse for not warding. But first, this video is sponsored by a brand that loves League of Legends, supporting esports by sponsoring Cloud9, and now also sponsoring this channel. It's blockchain.com. Blockchain.com is one of the biggest crypto services, with 1/3 of all Bitcoin transactions that have taken place happening through their service. They have an easy to use crypto wallet, letting you buy and trade a vast selection of different cryptocurrencies, and one great thing comparing blockchain.com to League of Legends is that when you join blockchain.com, there aren't 4 teammates trying to sabotage you. Blockchain instead has its own learning portal to help you improve your knowledge of crypto, even if you're new. They teach you how each cryptocurrency is useful and help you learn more about everything your wallet can do. Join the other 81 million wallets created in over 200 countries, and use blockchain.com's lightning fast trading speed. Click the link in the description to easily sign up. Just give them a few details including a quick identity check and you're done, ready to trade, and even get 0 fees on your first trade with my link. Our player today is named Whatley. He made a new account for this challenge, named No Ward Whatley, to keep reminding himself exactly what he couldn't do. One of the hardest things for him was making sure he didn't accidentally place a ward, so he completely unbound the key, but he still had to avoid years of muscle memory, having to run past control wards instead of clearing them, or face check bushes instead of using a vision plant to look inside them. This was going to be a very hard challenge. So starting in silver, he needed to choose a role. Support was basically out. If you aren't warding at all on support, you might as well be griefing the game. Their vision is what enables the rest of the team to go anywhere, and Whatley's main focus was to make sure he wasn't ruining games. Jungle was similar, with not being able to take crab, and no way to vision control objectives. Every play you would make would be so high risk, turning the game into a coin flip instead of being skill based. What about AD carry? Well, I think all of our AD carries are already doing the no warding challenge, placing as little vision as they possibly can, so we don't need to talk about that role. So he was left with mid and top. Mid lane was definitely possible, but lots of the champions rely on playing around vision. Being immobile but having high damage burst, you need to be able to plan out your moves. You can't just walk into areas that have no vision, so top lane was his choice. The most gankable lane, but also the one with the tankiest champions. Testing out lots of picks on his way to gold, Whatley needed a pick that could handle 1v1 and win lane, also having the mobility to escape from ganks, and ideally, if possible, even being able to 1 versus 2. This was a huge choice. If you picked an immobile champion or a squishy champion like Jace, this challenge would be lost. The enemy jungler would love to go top lane every game and camp him, and the answer to this video would be no, it's not possible to get high elo without wards. So instead, he wanted something a bit tankier. He started playing Warwick and Tahm Kench top, both champions that can easily handle 1v1 fights. In fact, most people think they're really OP and can't be beaten 1v1. Even I hate playing against Tahm Kench top lane, but I think it is a great idea for this challenge. You can't deny how viable it is in this situation, having the power to kill 1v1, the dash to escape ganks, and the tankiness to bait 2 versus 2 fights. These are also the 2 champions that the enemy jungler really doesn't want to gank. They have so much health sustain and they're so hard to finish off. You often just want to leave them alone and let them fall off. If you try and play a ranged top laner, you know the jungler's going to come gank you as much as they can, but if you're dirty enough to pick Tahm Kench top, I'd rather not even look at you and go bot lane instead. Since all of their power is in early game, they don't have to worry as much about having no vision. Even playing with Ghost on Tahm Kench for more 1v1 chase down, making him even more annoying to play against. I'm just sorry you even have to watch this. The picks kind of need to be OP early on, because if you take a trade at the wrong time and the enemy jungler ganks you when you have no vision, any other champion would just be dead. Luckily, these champions are like a wall of health that enemies struggle to get through, with Warwick even taking barrier to bait enemies and outplay them at the last second. The champions both fall off terribly late game, losing the ability to carry fights. Being immobile, tanky tanky frontliners for their team, but by that point you can use your team's vision. With these picks, Whatley didn't really have any problem getting to platinum, but from there the tryharding started. Starting the game, Whatley needed to track the enemy jungle. Without wards, he had to completely rely on timing their camps as they cleared them. This game, the enemy jungle starts topside. Mundo leashes for Echo, which Whatley can easily see, with Echo showing mid and bot lane multiple times throughout his clear, so Whatley has a full 5 minutes straight with zero risk of being ganked, which lets him take advantage of the matchup, even without having any wards. If instead the enemy jungle started bot side and pathed towards top lane when you weren't paying attention, then top lane's going to die to that gank almost every time since you don't have a ward. In an ideal world, your jungler would be there to counter gank sometimes, letting you play more aggressive even when you're about to get ganked. And these champions are pretty good at baiting a 2 versus 2. As he was climbing to diamond, laning was actually the easiest part, not even having to spend time walking to river to ward, so he can constantly be pressuring the enemy laner. If he was ganked, he would use his dash to escape, or rely on his tankiness to run away. He couldn't track the enemy jungle for the whole game, so he had to rely on global cues, like Dragon being killed, or Rift Herald dying, to track them as the game went on. Hitting Diamond 4, a huge problem appeared. That problem was mid-game. Sure, his champion started to fall off, but more importantly, Whatley began to notice something about the lack of vision. If his team was ahead, the game actually felt harder, with it being much more difficult to snowball and actually end the game. Without vision, you'll never have perfect information of a play, so your risk is much higher in every situation. Without a ward, he wasn't able to deep ward in the enemy jungle to spot people early on and avoid the risk. Sometimes he takes a big risk and it works. Other times a risk like this can throw the game, but if you were able to ward, you wouldn't have to go for these risks and could avoid any chance of a loss. Instead of making smart, calculated plays, there was a lot more just face-checking bushes and reacting to what happens afterwards. You can't really know if it's going to be good or bad, so you're forced to play more like a low elo player and just hope for the best. The real point in warding is to tell you what enemies are about to do, so you can figure out a plan to punish them for it, reacting in a way that counters their idea. If you have wards, then it's easy to see what's coming, and enemies have to walk through your vision to get to you, putting them at the mercy of your play. Without your own vision, enemies' plays are enabled. They can do whatever they want to start a fight, and use that to get advantages. If you're ahead, they can find a miracle comeback fight, or keep picking off your team to stop you from ending. Like here, the enemies can walk into Baron no problem, getting an Arnold into a set engage. This combo in this choke point is probably one of the only ways that the enemies can win a fight. Fortunately this game, Whatley's team were so far ahead they still won the fight, but there's no point giving the enemy team a chance like this. Whatley found himself stuck in Diamond 4, unable to set up plays for his team. If you want to set up a play 1 minute in the future, maybe you want to put a ward down in the enemy jungle before a dragon fight, you just can't. So you're limited to making a play in the moment, instead of planning ahead to make sure it's good, limiting how well you can actually play. And if you're behind, it's even worse. Not having wards denies your team from making comeback plays, and gives map control to the enemy team to take whatever they want to go for. Comebacks are hard enough in League, but without wards they're close to impossible. Whatley remained stuck in Diamond 4 for a full 80 games. He's played these picks before and he's usually much higher elo, but these problems just kept coming up. In teamfights he couldn't ward bushes, so enemies could just run into one and be safe. You can't hit skill shots if you can't see them, and fights can be lost just off these tiny disadvantages, which can then snowball into games being lost. Impressively, he was still able to contribute and win some of these games, finally escaping Diamond 4. Another thing he just couldn't do was split pushing. A normal top laner would be getting an advantage using the 1v1 power of his champion in a side lane, but without vision, he couldn't really cover himself by warding, so every time he would try to split push, he would be collapsed on. It turned out that even on these strong 1v1 champions, grouping with his team became much more reliable to win games, using the vision that they provide to get kills instead. Without his teammates' wards, the higher rank you go, the games would start to get basically impossible to close out. No matter how big your lead was, enemies can constantly surprise you by popping out a fog of war, and punish any tiny mistake you make. He took teleport every game, making sure he could always join his team, but always lacked a good TP flank ward for fights. He can never set them up himself, and his jungle and mid laner would often swap to sweeper, with his AD carry having blue ward, so Whatley was forced to use TP just to join his team, rather than making any game-winning plays, which took away a lot of the power of how he plays top lane. Pushing through all of these problems and adapting to each one, he kept climbing, and even though he had been a Grandmaster player with literally these champions as his mains, he just managed to hit Master after over 200 games, actually feeling like this challenge had made him a worse player. Instead of thinking ahead and making smart plays, he relied so much on just reacting to the moment, and hoping that it worked out. The challenge was over, but what did he learn from it? Well, clearly warding is good. It opens up opportunities for your team and shuts down enemies from surprising you. All the disadvantages he faced show how important they are, making a difference in almost every situation, from lane to mid-game to team fighting and split pushing. But also, you can get to high elo without even using them, especially for top, mid and AD carry. Warding shouldn't be your main focus, and if your team has terrible vision, it's likely not your fault. This channel is full of people getting to high elo with new ways of playing the game, and even removing a whole mechanic did not stop this player. The thing it proved most to me is that being comfortable on your champion and playing them in the way that maximizes their kit is vital. If Whatley had picked up a new champion for this challenge that was not a 1 vs 1 bruiser, he would have been stuck in Diamond 4 for hundreds of games, and maybe still even be there now. Is Tahm Kench OP in 1v1? Yes, he is. Is Warwick top OP in 1v1s? Yes, 100% that is as well. Warwick even has a bug right now that means your Q has no cooldown. Riot refuses to fix it and it's easy to reproduce, making it even better in 1v1s. You just hold down your Q on a low HP minion for a specific time, and the ability doesn't go on cooldown. Whatley didn't use this at all when he was climbing, so it's not the reason he did well, but if you want some free LP, you might as well play it before Riot fixes it. And so these two picks definitely helped with this challenge, but the restriction of this challenge was that he couldn't use any vision himself, so if you can't use wards and sweepers and stuff like that, then everything else should be allowed. I've also seen assassin mid mains with 4 vision score in a challenger game in my Discord, which shows that if you want to win games, you just need to focus on what your champion is good at, and maybe warding just isn't that important for some of them. Even I have reconsidered the amount I focus on warding because of this challenge, and I definitely value wards more than most players. I'd buy at least 1 control ward every time I base on jungle and support, increasing to 2 late game, and I did this just because that's what the pro players I have studied do. But just because a pro player is doing something doesn't mean it's 100% correct, especially for solo queue. After talking to Whatley and some other off-meta players recently, one of their tips is that you waste so much gold on control wards. Often it's better to get your power spike faster, because that can start to win you the game. I'm not saying that no one should ever ward, there's definitely a minimum limit of wards that every team needs to have success, like knowing when enemies are starting a Baron and which areas of the map are safe for you to enter. But being in position for this fight with the right items and correct positioning is just as important. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to see another off-meta player who has a completely different style of using vision, why not check out my TF support video from last week? And thanks again to our sponsor, link below.